If you listen closely, the walls of Brown Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Selma, Alabama, tell stories. In 1965, the church opened its doors as a base of operation for the Southern Christian Leadership Council and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Brown Chapel AME served as the primary meeting place as these two groups crafted strategies and mobilized engagement in what would become known as the Selma Campaign for Voting Rights. It was from the steps of the church that Hosea Williams and John Lewis led 600 marchers across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to the massacre that would become known as Bloody Sunday. Televised images of the march and massacre brought the horrors of racial terrorism into the living rooms of the American public, as brutal images of bloodied and severely injured marchers dominated the evening news. I first walked the labyrinth of Brown Chapel's sacred halls as part of the 50th anniversary commemoration of the Selma marches in March 2015. I went to pay homage to the ancestors whose work laid the foundation for what I do today. I'm the founder of the Faith Matters Network, a nonprofit social justice collective committed to catalyzing the leadership of marginalized communities throughout the American South. As a young African-American clergywoman and AME minister, the significance of that space was not lost to me. You see, I am the fruit of the labor that resulted from the courageous work done by foot soldiers in the Selma movement and their counterparts in places like Greensboro, North Carolina, and Jackson, Mississippi. At 29 years old, I've never known the humiliation of entering into venues through the back entrance, nor have I been forced to contend with facilities defined by the myth of separate but equal. Yet, in a world where it is still controversial to claim that Black lives matter, progress must not be confused with victory. Television images have been replaced by viral videos of Black people dying at the hands of police. Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile. We say your names. My own story embodies the paradox of African-American progress in the decades following the fall of Jim and Jane Crow. By all conventional indicators, I've done well. Raised by two college-educated parents in a middle-class household, I had access to resources and opportunities that would be the envy of many. I went to great schools. I've consistently been able to secure employment. And unlike many of my sisters in ministry, I've been embraced by my faith community and supported through the ordination process. Despite my success, the sting of racism is never far away. The first time I was made to feel less than human because of the color of my skin was on the playground at school. I was 5 years old. On a daily basis, one of my white classmates teased and taunted me, declaring that I must be dirty because why else would my skin be brown? The taunts escalated until one day, at the apex of the bullying, I was called a nigger for the first time. As a child, I knew very little about the complex history of race relations in the United States. I did know that my Blackness made me different, and for some folks, that wasn't a good thing. Throughout the years, class privilege did not protect me from the implicit and explicit racial bias I experienced in the many contexts I navigated. There were the microaggressions verbalized in college classrooms where I was often asked to share the African-American cultural perspective on a particular issue, as if the opinions of the Black community were monolithic. There were the tense moments of verbal harassment walking down streets and shopping with friends in communities where Black people had no business going. Today, My ministry cannot be separated from my commitment to equity. The first time I died, it was alongside 30 others on the floor of a Walgreens in Nashville, Tennessee. My death was part of a die-in, a direct action strategy that in the fall of 2014 became a signature of the broad coalition of organizations and local movements known as Black Lives Matter. The cool linoleum tile we laid upon is sacred ground. 5 years before the Selma marches, the Walgreens was a site of the Nashville sit-in campaign of 1960, a movement notable for its early emphasis on disciplined, nonviolent resistance and success in desegregating 6 of the city's lunch counters in just over 3 months. Against the backdrop of racial terrorism and the death-dealing power of Jim and Jane Crow, these prophets of progress had the audacity to envision a better world and the courage to risk their lives to make that vision a reality. As I lay dying, I wondered what our movement predecessors would have thought of us, obstructing traffic to shut it down. It seems like every social movement in the United States has tried to stake its claim as the true heirs to the civil rights movement, as if the movement was a popular one. Let us not forget that Dr. King's famous letter from a Birmingham jail was not directed to white supremacists, but to the moderate majority that refused to take a stand. When Mike Brown was shot and killed by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, it was a catalyzing reminder that progress is a process and not a destination. For over 4 hours, his body laid smoldering under the heat of the noonday sun, uncovered and exposed. His blood spattered on an altar of pavement, bearing public witness to a hushed truth that our elders in Selma and Nashville knew all too well. Justice has never been given freely. It has always required blood sacrifices from those bold enough to demand it. Our democracy is an unfinished building, which each new generation contributes to its construction, either by removing that which is oppressive and harmful, or contributing a new innovation that helps move us toward our vision of a more perfect union. There are those who condemn our contemporary acts of civic protest as a stain on the legacies of the young protesters who once occupied the ground we found ourselves sitting upon in Walgreens that day. It makes them uncomfortable, and that is exactly what it's meant to do. The two things that young people have always had are our voices and our bodies. Instead of sitting at lunch counters, we use our bodies to block traffic in the streets. The context may be different, but the acts of resistance we are expressing are variations on the same theme of liberation for all, which started all those years ago. The melody is different, but the heartbeat of justice is the same. We have moved from "we shall overcome" to "we gon' be all right," just as our elders moved from "follow the drinking gourd" to "ain't gonna let nobody turn me around." There's a myth perpetuated on cable news that millennial activists have no sense of our history. Many TV journalists believe we have no respect for institutions and don't understand the concept of leadership. They asked, who will be your MLK? Yet, our ethos of leadership emerges not from the model of a single charismatic leader, but flows from the belief that each of us has the power to transform our lives and communities. We've adopted the mantra of a lesser-known giant of the civil rights movement, Ella Baker, who noted that strong people do not need strong leaders. To understand our resistance to traditional institutions is to understand our context. As young adults who emerged into adolescence in the post-9/11 era, we are not naive about the challenges before us. Our social and political identities were shaped against ongoing narratives of war and religious conflict. Even the non-religious financial institutions that we were told to put our faith in because they were too big to fail faltered. Today, we as a nation find ourselves fighting a different type of war on our home front. It is a war over the vision of what our nation will become. At stake is the very soul of our nation, with battles being fought over kitchen tables and anonymous internet comment sections and at political rallies. As racial and religious demographics continue to shift in the direction of the United States becoming a majority-minority country, it has brought along with it the potential for positive transformation and a well of anxiety and fear. It is this fear of change and difference coupled with the instability of our economy which has caused some of us to retreat into tribalism, clinging closely to those with whom we have much in common. We read and watch media sources that only support our own opinions and biases. We live in communities with people like us. We demonize those who do not share our opinions. At its worst, this trend inflames our deeply held prejudices and leads to a violent scapegoating of those we brand other, thus robbing them of their humanity. The young activists who find themselves on the streets are not seeking to destroy or kill that which came before us, but to compost. We want to take that which is best and most nourishing from the institutions dying around us and cultivate a new vision of what our country can be. We know that none of us will be free until we're all free. Now, it would be easy to submit to the seduction of hopelessness in this moment and to cower in the face of uncertainty. But I'm a Christian, which means I'm a prisoner of hope. I believe in the possibility of transformation, salvation, and deliverance because they are the very stuff that comprise my faith. I know this path to freedom will not happen alone. It will require all of us to dig deep, bridge our divides, surface the best of ourselves, and give it to one another. It will require a naming of that which is right and wrong. It will require that we follow in the footsteps of the young leaders of the past and not allow our silence to become a betrayal of all of that which we hold dear. The very soul of our democracy is at stake. Which path will we choose?